And I will say good morning to everybody who is on streaming and out there on Radio Land. This is Patricia and David, Gulf Harbour Radio, ZMH 286. We actually have, it's almost, we're sort of breathing a sigh of relief. We've had a very torrid 40 hours here in New Zealand. It's just been squall after squall, very nasty weather. Certainly I feel very sorry for anybody who was coming in to this sort of weather. It's just been horrible. But today we have absolutely tranquil blue skies, a bit on the nippy side, 14 degrees because of the southwest wind now. Well, it's only about 3 knots. The barometer is rapidly rising from its plunging depth that it got to, and we're now at 1008. And it's barely got about 5% cloud on the horizon. But I can tell you it's not very pleasant out there. Revilo sent in an email before, and you should really pay attention to this, folks, because this is why we say really watch your approach conditions, and you will keep that in mind when David is talking later. Revilo will be in tonight, probably midnight. Their position is 3339 south and 173 east at the moment. They have currently 20 to 25 knots from the southwest, but they did have squalls yesterday, the ones that we got, 45 knots they got in a rain squall yesterday. So they're motor sailing with a storm trysail and a free reef main at the moment, and I think they will be looking forward to Opua with relief. Waves are still swell 3 metres, 60% cloud, but I think they will be going, and I haven't checked our weather, I think they will be improving as they get closer. But yes, not very good conditions for the boys on board Revilo, but they're still managing to send an email, so that's good. I'm sure Mum and Dad there at Kawau will be very thankful to know all is well. Well, I didn't say all is well on board, but I'm sure they're making pretty good progress anyway. So we're going to have a lot of weather today because we know there are a lot of you wanting to move. The way David is going to do it is quite different today, and he will cover the boats coming to New Zealand, first of all from New Caledonia, then from Minerva Reef, then Fiji, then Tonga. That will be after he's sort of covered the overall picture. So that's the story there. There is a lot to cover, so be ready for that with your pen and paper if you can't get onto streaming later. All right, I am going to start a bit of news now, seeing as it's 7 o'clock, almost on the dot, 1 minute to go. A bit of news for those people who want to travel to the UK. They have now approved e-passport immigration, so that will reduce the lines that you have to wait behind. It's always a pain to get there and have to stand behind 10,000 other people. If you have a passport, an e-passport from New Zealand, Australia, Canada or the USA, you'll be able to whiz through passport control in the UK. For those of you coming to New Zealand, and I keep forgetting to tell you this, those who are not New Zealanders, because the New Zealanders know all about our accident compensation system, it's called ACC. If you have any accident in New Zealand, no matter how trivial or how serious or whatever you're doing, you can do one of these wild and stupid things like jumping off cliffs with a parasail or bungee jumping or ruin your back getting a wet sail out of the lock. It doesn't matter what it is, so long as you do it in New Zealand, you will have any medical costs or physiotherapy costs paid for by this system that's just called ACC. It was set up years ago to avoid any of these ridiculous lawsuits that occur were occurring in other parts of the world. So you can rest assured you will get looked after. It might be a little slow, but it will certainly be looked after when you are here, provided the accident occurred in New Zealand. you will actually contribute a bit to that if you buy a car, because when you pay your registration, a proportion of that goes to ACC, and the rest of it comes from New Zealanders and companies in New Zealand that pay a substantial amount actually to keep the system going, because sometimes the costs of an accident can be quite high. Okay, what else is there? Oh, the UK and various parts of Europe are having horrendous weather at the moment. We've been moaning about ours, but Venice is under flood. All of St. Mark's Square is a lake at the moment. They actually have boardwalks there for people to get across, and various areas are absolutely metre under flood. There's been heavy rain and a high tide coinciding. Of course, the global warming people say it's global warming, but in fact it is the combination of heavy rain and the high tide. Happens from time to time, as you probably will recall. And a full moon. Oh, that's true, a full moon as well. What I do, and this is quite funny, I sort of scan the various newspapers around the world to get bits of news for you. And when I read The Guardian late last night, I found that we'd had an earthquake here in New Zealand. A 6.2 earthquake actually in the middle of the afternoon. We didn't even experience the earthquake because the weather at the time was blowing so much the house was shaking anyway. But it was a 6.2 earthquake, sort of midway between sort of Auckland and Taranaki. It was sort of around Taumarunui area for those that know the North Island. The scientists say it was caused by the two tectonic plates that we sort of shoulder. New Zealand shoulders these plates. They were having a little bend. I actually thought it was great that we had this earthquake, because we're trying to organise a big meeting next week of people along this peninsula, all the people involved in any major emergency. And of course, if you have something like this, it just makes people a little bit more aware that there is the possibility of something like this happening. We have one road that goes along our peninsula, so anything that upsets the road is going to have a major effect on the tens of thousands of people that live on this peninsula. Going across to the other side of the world, President Trump is sending 5,200 troops and military equipment to their border with Mexico. He's absolutely determined to stop the thousands of Central American migrants from coming into America. He doesn't want to end up like Mrs. Merkel, who made the mistake in 2015 of bringing in tens of thousands of Syrians and so forth that were coming up through the rest of Europe. So that was the start of her demise, and Mr. Trump doesn't want to see all those folk arriving in America. The people, of course, over there, his enemies, are determined that he's just trying to position himself for the midterm elections, but the fact is that these people are in Mexico now, so he has to do something about it.
It's a bloody invasion.
It's an invasion, yes, sir. All right, here's something for you. A notorious Boston mob boss, this guy is called Whitey Bulger. You probably won't remember, he's even older than you are. 89. Anyway, he was in jail for about 11 murders that they knew of. He was transferred to a new jail yesterday and was killed by an inmate with rival mafia ties. So there you are. You're not even safe in jail.
Well, that's rude.
Yeah, that is rude, isn't it? But it will save the taxpayers some money there. Not that he would have lasted very long at 89, but anyway, they won't have to worry about that now. There's been absolutely appalling weather in Europe, as I mentioned, with the rain in Venice, and a small cruise ship that set off from Southampton to cruise the Canary Islands had to make an emergency stop in Spain before returning to have water pumped out. The seas were absolutely horrible, a bit like what Revilo was having to cope with here, except they sound an awful lot worse. And were worse. So that would have been a very pleasant trip to the Canary Islands for those folk.
That's it. So we did it when that catamaran flooded.
Yeah, that's right.
Remember that?
Yes, we were waiting, and we was at Rota, and they had seas that were pretty bad, and a catamaran that had taken off from the UK got flipped whilst we were patiently waiting at Rota to get through to Spain. All right, the new iPad Pro has been released. It has facial recognition, so no home button. Quite frankly, I think I would leave it at the shop because I have an iPhone which is meant to have fingerprint recognition, and I tell you what, you wouldn't rely on it if you wanted to get into something desperately. In fact, I don't bother using it anymore. So the facial recognition, imagine, I mean, if you had a family iPad, it would have to recognise all the members of the family, and maybe if you grew a beard, it wouldn't recognise you.
Yeah.
So there you have it. But anyway, you're up with the news from Apple. Frankly, I wouldn't buy an Apple next time, but unfortunately we're locked in now to Apple for our travelling communication needs. So I'd like to finish on something that's kind of interesting, and I'm sure that this is going to distract you from when I pass the microphone. But it turns out that if your second toe is longer than your big toe, it means you are a natural leader. Now, the reason this came up is because somebody has worked out that all Prince Harry's girlfriends, including Meghan, have larger second toes, and they've got pictures of their feet in sandals showing that the second toe is slightly longer than the big toe.
But he's in big trouble now.
He's in big trouble now. There you are, folks. I'm sure you are now all about to demonstrate to your people on board whether your toes are indicative of your being a leader. Okay.
There's other comparisons with digits.
There's other comparisons with digits. Well, we won't go into those. What we're going to do now, there is an awful lot of weather to go through this morning, so I'm going to hand over the microphone. It looks like there is a lovely sunny day up there at Dinnerau where there are a lot of people. Yes, Diego is confirming the bad weather in the west coast of Italy. 5 people died. Boy, I haven't seen that. They registered gusts over 80 knots. Boy, that's a lot of wind. Many tornadoes and lots of damages in the marinas. But I wonder what it would be like at where we were. We had a beautiful marina in Italy for the winter up at San Remo. Okay, thank you for that news. I'm just scanning through. We talked talked about Erie 2 and Serrani. They're approaching Bundaberg. Bit of a race on there by the look of it. I think I'll put my money on Erie 2, although it looks like Serrani has really caught up the last 24 hours. They've done quite well. There's an interesting note from Erie 2. By the look of it, has a Cape Horn wind vane autopilot, definitely for sale if anyone wants it. I think he's fairly fed up with his Cape Horn wind vane autopilot. So if anyone wants one for parts, there you have it. You can contact Erie 2. So I will scan a few more of the notes that have come in on the YRT site. But I think that's about it for me. I want to leave the microphone to David. There's quite a few questions, and as I mentioned, when he starts the weather, he's going to do it a little bit differently today. So please pay attention if you are wanting a passage. It's getting really confusing because of all the different ideas that you have got for when you're going to leave. But I'm going to pass the microphone after a pause to see if there's anybody with anything urgent. There you go.
All right, good morning, everybody. And Tricia's right. Based on emails, it sounds like there is mass discrepancy on departure dates. As of the last weekend, the bulk of you were telling us you wanted to go Thursday tomorrow. And then all of the planning that I had done to look for you is based on tomorrow. And then, of course, yesterday and everything in between, we've been hearing multiple dates. Monday is a date. I'm getting busy with all of these various departure times that you've got there. It's not like it sounds as if there's a major panic. It's just that everybody has got different ideas on what to do. So I hope you have taken a little bit of time to read some of our departure ideas that we've got in our library on Gulf Harbor Radio. that would help you determine the ideal times to go. These represent a lot of years of our experience. And yes, they're only ideas, but they're better than nothing for the most part. And I'm going to touch base on a few of those when I get done with this. I'm not sure either that many of you are carefully looking at your arrival weather. Now, I could be wrong on that. I'm sure many of you are doing that, but I get the feeling that a lot of you are not. And the reason I say that is we're getting reports of yachts that are arriving in pretty horrendous conditions when that could have been avoided if the departure date was a little bit different, or if you maybe use the motor a little bit more, or a little more sail when things got a bit light but you were too tired. Whatever the reasons, not following a passage plan is probably the biggest reason that we've found over the number of years we're doing this, that people just don't have a nice time. Now, this passage is not a trivial passage, even at the best of times. So it's one that you really need to be careful about if you want to enjoy it. Now, some of the younger kids out, we can call them kids now, they don't mind getting bashed up a little bit. And I can remember when we first started, it wasn't a major thing for us either. But as we've gotten older, we really like to have a passage that's a little bit comfortable.
Very comfortable.
Very comfortable from the chief over here, and I can't blame her. It's not only hard on the body, but it's hard on the yacht as well. And of course, the way prices are these days, just about anything that you do on the boat is expensive. So anyway, looking at the last few days and in some detail and looking at the various models and whatnot, I would say that this Thursday, this was the original day that most of you wanted to go, is still in the cards. And I think that's what we're going to be basing things on. Now, I can assure you, as Patricia had mentioned, that had you arrived in New Zealand the last couple of days, you absolutely would not have liked what Mother Nature had dished out. We've had some very, very heavy weather out there, and not just wind, but pretty big seas, cross seas, and just not nice at all. So let's back off for a second here, and we're going to look at the synoptic picture for today, and this is lunchtime today. You may wonder why I pick things like lunchtime and dinner time. We found that people remember things a little bit better as opposed to 1100 hours or 1300 hours or whatever. So, and also, lunch is one of my favorite times. So this is lunchtime today. We've got 3 players. We have a high that is to the south of French Polynesia. It's quite strong, and I would say roughly 1031 millibar central pressure, 1031. This high is ridging, well, in a number of directions, but one of the ridges is aiming toward Niue. Next, we have the complex low system, and a complex low is a large trough, a depression with multiple centers. And this mass, if you will, of multiple centers is just barely to the east of New Zealand, having terrorized the country here over the weekend. And the third player is the next high that is now in the Tasman. And it's pretty strong as well. It's 1027, 1027 millibar. And this one is ridging toward the islands. And this is the important one. Now, it's this last high that is making departure, departure today a non-starter, but a starter for tomorrow. The reason not today is that winds on the eastern side are basically southerly quadrant and not very pleasant. As an example, from New Zealand to 25 south, we're looking at 25 knots with many areas of 30 knots. And the seas that are between New Zealand and 30 south are 3 to 4 meters. So that's not very pleasant in that area, if you will. Now, what I'm going to do is take a look first at New Caledonia. We've got a lot of boats, a gaggle of you that do want to leave New Cal for New Zealand. Most of you that are going to Australia are already on your way. I think probably the bulk of you have already undertaken that passage or are on the way. At the moment, well, first off, this is a 5 to 6 day passage. Now, I think departure time Saturday may be an idea for you to think about. The winds look to be east-southeast. They're going to be about 20 knots leaving New Caledonia. And then the winds lighten up considerably Sunday right through Tuesday, and they'll be around 15 knots or so. And they're going to be northeasterlies turning northwesterlies by the Tuesday time frame. So your arrival here in New Zealand would be roughly Thursday the 8th. I think that's what Thursday is, with hopefully northwest winds to push you into the Bay of Islands. We need to verify this over the next few days, so hang fire on that. So those are the yachts that have been asking about departure from New Cal. And again, I have to remind you that this is not a recommendation. This is just an idea. We don't give advice. Now for the Minerva yachts. We've got a lot of yachts there, 9 at last count, maybe more. Now, leaving Minerva to New Zealand, it's generally about 5 days from go to woe. We've done it so many times I don't even remember, but it's roughly that. And for you folks, departure Saturday also is probably a pretty decent idea, and I believe that's the 3rd of November, where you'll have reasonable east-southeast winds. Prior to that, most of your winds are going to be on the nose, and for you younger people out there that don't care about that and enjoy tacking, and it can be enjoyable, I suppose, you can certainly go anytime you want. But that would put arrival about 8 or 9 November, certainly early 9 November, with reasonable northwest winds. The front will be knocking on the door at that point. So the sooner that you get underway at that point, the better. The ideal thing would be 8 November arrival, 8 November. So that's the story for Minerva. Now, on to the Fiji yachts. And I suppose that group is the biggest gaggle of all the yachts that are out there. You could tell we used to be pilots as well. Anyway, most of the input that we have gotten was departure tomorrow, Thursday. And that's pretty much what I think I'm sticking with at the moment. And that has come in, of course, like I said, via emails and chats on the net. So, Thursday, tomorrow, looking at fairly fresh southeast winds. It's not bad. We'll call it about 20 knots. And I'll call it a mean wind of 20. And by the way, when I do that, I've said this a couple of times, but it's probably worth repeating. My general rule on giving winds like this, or even if you're looking at the Gribs and you see a little wind arrow there, the rule that I use is a plus or minus 5 knots. So whatever you happen to see, plus or minus 5 knots, and add 40 to 50% for gusts. If you do that, you'll be in pretty good shape, I think. Now, on Thursday, tomorrow, our Tasman high is going to be to the east of Brisbane. It's going to be roughly 30 south and 160 east, and moving toward New Zealand, just north of New Zealand. There is also a high developing in the Oz Bight, the Australian Bight, and everybody now knows where that is. Now, that happens to be one of my little telltales that we personally use for a passage window. We like to see a high over New Zealand, and we like to see a high in the Bight. And this is actually based on years and years of doing this passage, and it just seems to work out that way. Not always, but it tends to be when you see that, it gets our attention, and then we start looking a little bit more in detail. So, actually, Friday, the 2nd of November, day after tomorrow, that high is going to be a little bit closer to New Zealand, and the high that's in the Bight is going to be very, very well established. But I would prefer if you leave for it to be the Thursday time frame. So those departure winds southeast, like I said, about 20 knots roughly. Now this is a 7 to 8 day passage, and there's going to be moaners out there that say we can't do that in 7 or 8 days, and I say yes, you can. Between the wind that we've got out there and the fact that you have an engine, you could maintain a target speed to give you that type of a passage. Now, many yachts, by the way, well, the last series of yachts that came into New Zealand have done it in 6 days. That, of course, was an ideal window, but still it could be done. But it does mean paying attention to the passage plan and turning that key, if you have to, the key to the motor. Now, these are my views at the moment for the Fiji part of this little trip. And as I said before, we never do this at Gulf Harbor Radio. We don't give the advice. It's up to you to do the plan. But there seems to be so much confusion. Maybe that's not a correct word, but we just decided to drop these ideas into the pot for you to think about, and that's why we picked. Actually, you picked the Thursday, and we're sort of going along with that being a reasonable departure. Now, those of you that are in Tonga, I haven't talked about the Tonga people. You could use the Fiji idea because you're fairly close to Fiji, but I would prefer to make your way to Minerva Reef as soon as you can and leave with the Minerva bunch when they go on or about 3 November. So in other words, make your way now to Minerva instead of heading straight away to New Zealand. I think it would put you in at a better angle. Okay, now Friday the 9th, looking at GFS, as I'm sure you have, it does show a weak frontal band over New Zealand. Now, if that is true, the Fiji yachts are probably going to strike this. Now, behind the front is the start of the new ridge. That's the next high that's moving in, and that's going to have moderate southwest winds. However, looking at ECMWF, they're a little bit more conservative in all of this, and they're giving us a bit of a break, indicating that you would make it into New Zealand before that frontal band arrived. And from what I could see on that front at the moment, it doesn't look particularly terrible at all. So you may be lucky in that regard. So if you've listened so far to all of this, it should be pretty obvious that at least for the Fiji boats, this is not a great passage. Not too bad from New Caledonia or from Minerva. So it's up to you to gamble with that 9 November potential frontal band. Now this is way out in terms of model reliability. This front could be weak. It might be stronger than weak. It might not occur. So waiting to leave on Monday, as we've heard many of you are now considering, this idea may unfortunately offer headwinds as you get closer to New Zealand. And all of that is going to be thanks to the new high that's will be developing in the Tasman. So we're certainly going to have to get subsequent model runs to ascertain that. So if you don't go tomorrow and you're going to delay, then that gives us a few more days to get more model input and see how things are shaking out. So you'll just have to let us know, I guess, tomorrow who's gone. And if you are underway, we'll give you any updates that you require. Just simply call us on the net here, and we'll update, give us your latitude and longitude, and I'll give you the latest model data for the day you call, the next day, or whatever it is that you require. Now, I'm going to take the time now to review just a few of Gulf Harbor Radio's ideas for passages, passage planning, what to look for, how fast are the main players in this. Now, all of this information you have if you take a look at what's in our library, but this is only going to take about a minute. And I've just picked out a few little odds and ends that might be of interest that'll be helpful to you. So we started off with the general rule that we like to see a high nearly over New Zealand or over New Zealand, and another high, two of them now, the second high in the Australian Bight. And that gets our antennas up to indicate there's a passage idea right there. Now, when your passage plan puts you at 30 south, whatever day it is that you're leaving doesn't matter, but whatever the day is that you're going to be at 30 south, that's about where you want to encounter any kind of a front that you see is going to take place. Now, oftentimes, you're going to have a front no matter what happens. The last good passage did not have a front, and oftentimes that happens. But more often, there is a front somewhere, and it's better to encounter the front at about 30 south, and not further south, but right around 30. And the reason for that is once that goes through, the way the winds are and usually the angles, it enables you to get into New Zealand fairly easily compared to otherwise. Also, ideally at 30 south, we would like to see a high over New Zealand. So the frontal band has gone through, the next high is moving in, and that would be over New Zealand. That would be the ideal thing for you to see. Now, if you're looking and you see a lot of Southern Ocean depressions that are moving west to east, if they're quite numerous and so forth, we would like to see one roughly in the Bight at that point. So again, this is when we're at 30 south. We'd like to see that depression in the Bight. And there's reasons for that, and we explain that in some of these papers. And when looking for highs, say we want to have a high over New Zealand, this more often than not this high will be at 1:30 east about 5.5 days prior to when you want it. So 1:30 east in about 5.5 days, that high should be over New Zealand. And what else quickly? Deep Southern Ocean lows certainly could affect passages. If they're present on your day of departure, the ideal position for the worst one would be about 070 east at about 50 south. So by the time that you leave the islands and get down to New Zealand, that will have scooted off and out of the way. So that's one thing you can look for. Now, lastly, I'm going to give you some general speeds and some times and so forth for the big features that we see. A cold front. Now, cold fronts travel on average 20 to 25 knots. And that's 8 to 10 degrees per day. And if you see one, if you get the New Zealand synoptic charts, or even if you're looking at the GRIBs, but far better if you're getting synoptic charts, it'll take 2 to 3 days if that front is over Tasmania. 2 to 3 days. Now a fast cold front, and we get them, they'll go 40 knots, and that's 16 degrees per day. And if that thing is over Tasmania, it'll be over New Zealand in 1.5 days. Now the high centers, highs average about 15 knots. That's 6 degrees a day. So wherever you happen to see one, well, let's put it this way, if one is sitting over Tasmania, it'll be over New Zealand generally 4 days later. And low centers, depressions, the center of depressions, not the frontal bands themselves, but the actual low itself. They generally travel at about 25 knots, and that's 10 degrees per day. So if that low were over Tasmania, or just to the north of it or to the south of it, doesn't matter. At that longitude, roughly 2.5 days later, it'll be at the longitude of New Zealand. So that's enough of that. I've got many more of these sorts of things that would help you in your planning and whatnot. But these may be useful for the current planning. So now I haven't done the weather in the islands. I guess you pretty much know what you've got by looking at the window. So I'm sorry about that, but I wanted to get this out and field any questions based on this because there's so many boats out there that do want to go. However, we'll pause now, and if you want weather in the islands, come now. If you want any information on this passage, then go ahead and give us a call too. And one thing came in, the yacht wants to, on this current passage, try to get down to Picton. The odds are that's not possible if you leave on Thursday. By the time you get to New Zealand, that frontal band will just about be arriving, and behind the frontal band will be southerly quadrant winds, and my guess would be that would be right on the nose for getting down to Picton. But it may not be that strong, and if you don't mind the tacking bit, then that's a possibility. But if you like nice, gentle beam reach, I don't think so. So that's the story. I'll pass it over to the chief. Come now with any questions.
All right, I think we've covered that. I think in summary, would Chameleon go? Yes, we would if it was from Newcastle or Minerva Reef, but not from Fiji. Did I get that right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much right. Yep. David likes to keep the crew happy, given that, you know, he's signed on for a lifetime and wants to keep the cook cooking. So he likes to keep the crew happy. And I don't think the Fiji trip this week would do that. But a little bit of delay. It looks pretty nice up there. And certainly it has not been nice here. All right, is there any questions? I hear it is not very good in Tonga for reception. Just as well, we've got the internet streaming. And is there anything else? I see that Scoops is going to renew their visas. Good idea, Andy. And is there anybody with anything that we have not covered? Nope. I think you've covered everything. All right. It was a fairly detailed one today, and just looking over his shoulder at the South Pacific satellite picture, it doesn't actually look too bad there. A little bit for those folks that are going to be tomorrow into Bundaberg, because if it's not going to be a beautiful sunny day, but who knows, that burst of cloud might have passed by since then. So good morning, everybody. We'll leave you to your ruminations and checking your length of your big toe and next toe. And we'll be back again tomorrow, same time, same place. So we'll leave the frequency to you. This is Gulf Harbour Radio, and wishing you all a good day. Talk to you tomorrow. Okay, good morning everybody out there. Quite a few of you out there this morning. Everybody interested to know what